In just 30 explosive seconds on the House floor, Jasmine Crockett turned Matt Gaetz's smug interruption into his most humiliating moment in Congress. Millions watched as the power dynamic flipped in real time. Was this the exact second America witnessed a new political force rise? The sun hadn't fully risen when Washington, D.C. slipped into a cold, steel-gray dawn. From above, a drone glided over the Capitol dome, the symbol of American power shrouded in a dim, ghostly light. First light slips through the clouds, clean surgical. The score swells. Drums pound. Strings stretch like a drawn bow. Washington holds its breath. This is not a routine morning. It is the stillness before a political storm that will shake the House. The camera moves into the marble corridors, vast, echoing, almost reverent. The sound of footsteps reverberates through the hallways, heavy like the march of soldiers heading into battle. Lawmakers file in, not with the casual stride of routine, but with the focused intensity of people sensing that history is about to unfold. A quick glance, a stiff handshake, a forced smile. Beneath the polished exterior lies a rising current of unease. Everyone can feel it, but no one dares say it aloud. A C-SPAN technician adjusts the camera. The red light flicks on. The lens locks onto the center podium, the exact spot where in a matter of hours, a young congresswoman will unleash a moment that will shake the nation. The voiceover cuts through the silence, deep and deliberate. That morning, no one knew that in just 30 seconds, the power dynamics inside the House would flip before the eyes of millions. The shot freezes on the massive wooden doors of the House chamber. Behind them, two figures, Jasmine Crockett and Matt Gaetz, are walking toward a collision that will become political legend. The doors remain closed, but inside a storm is gathering. Inside the Capitol, time begins to tighten like a coiled spring. The silence from earlier hasn't disappeared. It has condensed heavy and electric, as if the walls themselves know that by noon, everything will change. Two rooms, two people, two destinies hurtling toward collision. In a narrow office deep within the East Wing, Jasmine Crockett sits beneath the flickering glow of a golden desk lamp. The light carves her face into sharp lines, revealing eyes that don't waver. Before her lies the 341-page bill, its margins already scarred with highlighter strokes and handwritten notes. She flips each page like a blade, cutting through layers of pretense. Paragraph by paragraph, she dissects the language with the precision of a trial attorney preparing for a landmark case. Around her, sticky notes bloom like tactical flags on a battlefield. She's not rehearsing talking points. She's building an arsenal. Across the Capitol, in a pristine prep room that feels more like a backstage dressing area than a congressional office, Matt Gaetz stands before a mirror, straightening his tie with theatrical flair. His aides buzz around him, one adjusting the lighting, another flipping through cue cards. "This line will trend by tonight," one whispers. Gaetz smirks, not the smirk of a man about to legislate, but of an actor certain he's about to own the stage. He practices his interruption, watches his reflection deliver the punchline, imagines the camera angle, the clip that will loop on cable news. The scenes cut back and forth faster now. Jasmine's pen slashes under a section on Title I funding. Gaetz rehearses his condescending tone. Jasmine exhales, steady and deliberate. Gaetz laughs softly at his own lines. The voiceover lands like a gavel. One prepares for war. The other prepares for applause. The camera drifts through the Capitol's inner corridors where the marble floors shine like polished steel. The tension that had been building behind closed doors now spills into the hallways. Staffers rush past aides, clutch folders like shields, and the echo of hurried footsteps ricochets off the stone walls. It feels less like a workplace and more like a battlefield, moments before the first shot is fired. From opposite ends of the hallway, Jasmine Crockett and Matt Gaetz emerge. The camera slows to half speed, their steps echoing in rhythmic opposition. Jasmine's posture is steady, every movement deliberate. Her eyes are cold and fixed, the look of someone who has already mapped out the coming fight down to the last move. Gaetz walks with the casual arrogance of a man used to owning the spotlight, his lips curling into a half-sneer, half-smirk, like a stage performer savoring his cue before stepping under the lights. They pass each other in slow motion. The air seems to thicken. The faint hum of conversation fades into silence, leaving only the echo of their footsteps. For a split second, their gazes lock ice against fire, calculation against ego. It's not just a glance. It's the opening shot of a political duel. A colleague leans toward Jasmine, whispering, "He's going to interrupt you." She doesn't break eye contact, doesn't even blink. "Good," she replies, her voice like tempered steel. The heavy doors swing shut with a thunderous slam. It echoes through the marble halls like arena gates, sealing shut. The stage is set. The silence breaks. And now a question lingers. In American politics, what truly holds power? Silent preparation or loud performance? The chamber lights shift subtly as Jasmine Crockett rises from her seat, the weight of dozens of gazes turning toward her, like the tightening of a lens. The overhead spotlights catch her frame as she steps onto the podium, illuminating her against the backdrop of polished wood and solemn faces. A low murmur rolls through the room, then fades into stillness. It's as if the entire house has inhaled, but not yet exhaled. She places her papers neatly before her, though she hardly needs them. Her hands rest calmly on the podium. When she speaks, her voice cuts through the chamber with a steady, deliberate force, not loud, but clear enough to slice through distraction. "Mr. Speaker," she begins her tone, measured, unwavering. "I rise today to speak for the children of Texas who sit in classrooms where the roof leaks when it rains, where their textbooks are older than they are, where special education programs don't have enough materials to give each child their own worksheet." Each image lands like a hammer. The camera pans across the room. A few lawmakers who had been scrolling on their phones pause mid-swipe. One lowers his glasses. Another leans forward, eyes narrowing. Jasmine continues painting the reality with surgical precision. She speaks of crumbling ceilings, of teachers buying supplies out of their own pockets, of students with disabilities left behind by funding cuts. Her words don't come like slogans, they cut like testimony in a courtroom, cold, factual, undeniable. The chamber grows quieter with each sentence. Even the distant shuffle of papers fades. The C-SPAN camera zooms in on faces, expressions, shifting from indifference to uncomfortable recognition. Her voice never wavers. For a brief electric moment, the spectacle vanishes. There is no stage, no performance, only truth laid bare under the chamber lights. And standing at that podium, Jasmine Crockett doesn't just speak, she commands. The chamber holds its breath as Jasmine's words echo through the rafters. Every eye is fixed on her, every camera trained. But then, like a blade flashing in the dark, a sudden sound slices through the silence. "Mr. Speaker." A microphone on the right side of the chamber clicks to life, the red light flaring like a warning signal. Heads turn instinctively toward the source. Matt Gaetz stands, his hand resting casually on the stand, as if this were his cue all along. His voice, smooth but laced with condescension, rings through the room. "I'm just wondering," he begins, the edges of his words honed to a fine point, "whether the gentlewoman from Texas has actually read this bill, or if she's just reciting whatever her staff handed her this morning." For a heartbeat, there is only silence. Then a wave of murmurs swells through the chamber, like the rustling of an audience sensing blood in the water. Lawmakers glance at one another. Some smirk. Others straighten in their seats. The camera swings toward Gaetz. Under the harsh chamber lights, his smile sharpens the unmistakable grin of a man who believes he's landed the first blow. His posture is relaxed, almost theatrical, as if he's playing to an invisible audience beyond the walls of Congress. The energy in the room shifts instantly. The atmosphere that had moments ago belonged entirely to Jasmine now feels like a boxing ring after a sucker punch. A few members lean forward, whispering. Reporters' pens begin to scratch faster. Somewhere in the press gallery, a camera zooms in on Jasmine's face, waiting for her reaction. Gaetz tilts his head slightly, a picture of smug confidence, as if daring her to answer. He smiles for the cameras. His voice drips with practiced ease. Everyone in the chamber feels the trap snap into place. The voiceover returns low and tense as the music drops to a slow, menacing thrum. In politics, some fights begin with words. Others begin with the flick of a microphone. The blade has been drawn. The duel has begun. For a moment, the chamber hangs in the air, suspended between provocation and response. Gaetz's words linger like smoke after a gunshot. All eyes shift to Jasmine. The camera finds her face. She doesn't flinch. She doesn't even blink. Slowly, deliberately, she leans toward the microphone. Her voice is calm, almost too calm, like steel cooled in water. I yield for a question, she says evenly, not a speech. The words land like a quiet slap. A few lawmakers murmur. Gaetz's smile falters just enough to betray surprise. Jasmine opens the thick stack of papers before her. Her hands steady her movements, precise. The light above her podium catches the edges of the pages, glinting like blades. When she speaks again, her tone shifts, measured, prosecutorial, the voice of someone who has done the homework and knows exactly where to strike. Page 73. Beat Section 1042. Beat 22% cut to Title I, funding for low-income schools. She flips another page. Precise, cold. Page 189. The Striving Readers Literacy Program, gone. Another page turns. Her eyes lock on him. Escambia County, Florida. Your district. 8.2 million in federal support, gone. 15,000 students affected. The silence that follows is not empty. It's thick, charged, explosive in its stillness. A silence that says more than shouting ever could. Cameras swivel toward Gaetz. Lawmakers' heads turn in unison. Even his usual allies seem momentarily caught off guard. The grin is gone, now replaced by a flicker of something new. Calculation, maybe even unease. Jasmine doesn't move. She doesn't need to. The numbers have already spoken. The voiceover cuts in low and resonant like the strike of a gavel. In politics, there are insults, and then there are facts. One fades. The other leaves scars. And now a question remains. In politics, what makes an opponent truly tremble, sharp words or cold, undeniable numbers? The chamber remains suspended in a heavy silence after Jasmine's numbers land like precision strikes. For a split second, Gaetz's confident veneer holds. But Jasmine isn't finished. She's only just begun. She straightens her stack of papers with surgical calm. Her gaze never leaves him. When she speaks again, her voice sharpens, not louder, but colder, carrying the deliberate weight of someone tightening a noose. Since the gentleman is curious about preparation, she begins. Let's take a closer look at his. The first blade lands, 7 out of 9. Education and Workforce Committee meetings absent. The chamber stirs, heads tilt, pens stop moving. She doesn't pause. Another strike. 61% absence rate, the highest in the entire committee. The murmur swells now, no longer a quiet rustle, but a wave building inside the chamber. Cameras lock onto Gaetz. His jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. Jasmine flips to another page, her hands steady movements, precise like a prosecutor building a case. And during 17 of those scheduled committee meetings, the gentleman was not here debating policy. He was hosting fundraisers. The third strike lands like a thunderclap. The camera zooms in on Gaetz. Under the harsh chamber lights, a thin sheen of sweat begins to form along his hairline. His trademark smirk falters, cracking like a mask under pressure. What was once arrogance now teeters on discomfort. Around the room, lawmakers exchange looks. Even members of his own party lean back, arms crossed, gauging the spectacle with new eyes. This is no longer a scripted moment for cable news. This is live dissection. Jasmine continues, her tone unwavering. Mr. Speaker, if we're questioning who's done their homework, perhaps we should begin by asking who actually showed up to class. The line lands clean, sharp. The chamber reacts not with applause, but with that dangerous kind of silence that comes when a room collectively recognizes the truth. Reporters in the press gallery scribble furiously. Phones buzz as staffers send rapid messages to newsrooms. The spectacle Gaetz had hoped to control has slipped from his hands. He's no longer the star. He's the subject. The voiceover cuts in deep and resonant, carrying the weight of a verdict. Some reputations are built in front of cameras. Others are destroyed under the full weight of their glare. And as the camera lingers on Gaetz's face, his smile fractured, his eyes, narrowing, the illusion of invincibility begins to crumble. The silence in the chamber lingers heavy and electric after Jasmine's dismantling of Gaetz's record. He stands motionless for a second too long, and in that pause, everyone can feel it. His rhythm is broken, but he's not ready to retreat. He adjusts his mic, forcing his voice to steady. The familiar cadence returns, the practiced tone of a man who spent years performing for cameras. Mr. Speaker, he begins, a confident smile creeping back. This bill is about giving local communities the flexibility they need to decide how best to use their funds. It empowers districts, not Washington, to take control. The words are smooth rehearsed, designed to win headlines, if not arguments. For a moment, the air shifts. He's trying to reclaim the stage to paint himself as the reasonable voice after the storm. But Jasmine is ready. She doesn't look down, doesn't hesitate. She lifts a separate folder from the stack before her, a different set of documents prepared like a hidden blade. Flexibility. She repeats, her voice low but cutting through the chamber like a scalpel. She flips open the folder, her eyes locked on him. Let's talk about what that flexibility actually means in your own backyard. She holds up a page for the record. 17%, she says clearly. That's how much local property taxes had to rise in Escambia County to make up for these federal cuts. 17% on working families, on homeowners, on teachers. Is that your definition of flexibility? The chamber stirs, no, it erupts. A chorus of whispers sweeps across the floor like wind through dry grass. Lawmakers crane their necks to see. Reporters lift their cameras. The sound isn't chaos. It's the collective realization of a perfectly timed blow. Gaetz freezes just for a heartbeat. It's enough. His rebuttal, his carefully polished final move, has been turned back on him with surgical precision. And then something subtle happens. Across the aisle, a few Republican colleagues lean forward, pulling papers toward themselves, whispering to aides, flipping through Jasmine's references to verify the numbers. The camera zooms in on their faces, no longer smiling, no longer nodding on cue. Doubt has entered the room. Gaetz forces a grin, but it doesn't reach his eyes. The chamber no longer belongs to him. Jasmine has taken the narrative and twisted it like a blade. The voiceover cuts in resonant, almost cinematic. A final blow means nothing if your opponent saw it coming and built the counterattack into the very foundation of their case. The duel has shifted. The room knows it. He knows it. The chamber is still humming from Jasmine's counterstrike, the energy electric, alive, unpredictable. Gaetz's last move has been flipped back on him, like a sword caught mid-swing. And then from the quiet side of the room, a new voice rises, steady, weathered, unmistakably authoritative. A senior lawmaker rises slowly. The murmurs stop on instinct. Mr. Speaker, his voice carries firm and measured. I move to recommit this bill to committee. The words hang like a gavel strike. The chamber freezes. This is not victory. This is retreat. The C-SPAN cameras widen their shot, panning across the entire House floor. Row after row of lawmakers sit motionless, their faces etched with a mix of shock, calculation, and dawning realization. There is no applause, no protest, only a dense, tangible silence settling over the room like heavy fog. Gaetz stares down at his microphone. He leans forward. A breath. His fingers touch the switch. Then freeze. Slowly, deliberately, he turns the microphone off. A small click. A seismic shift. The lens cuts to Jasmine. She doesn't smile. She doesn't move. She stands at her podium like a general surveying a battlefield after the final decisive maneuver. Her stillness speaks louder than any words could. She knows what just happened. So does everyone else. Reporters in the gallery exchange wide-eyed looks. A producer in the control room mouths, "Oh my God." Across the chamber, a few Republican aides whisper frantically into their phones. The spectacle Gaetz intended to own has transformed into a historic reversal, and he's standing at the center of it. The voiceover returns deep and deliberate, each word falling like a drumbeat. In the halls of power, true victories do not come with cheers. They arrive in the silence that follows a reckoning. And now a question remains. Was this the moment Gaetz realized he had walked straight into the trap? Or does he still not understand what just happened? The silence in the chamber hadn't even faded when the storm began. Within hours, the 30-second clip of Jasmine's icy, devastating takedown was ripped from C-SPAN and uploaded across every platform like political dynamite. It started on Twitter, then bled into Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and late-night shows before anyone in Gaetz's camp could react. On cable news, the video played on loop. CNN dissected every sentence like legal analysts breaking down a landmark Supreme Court argument. Fox News brought in their usual firebrands to defend Gaetz, but even their hosts couldn't ignore the brutal precision of Jasmine's counterattack. Political podcasts lit up. Reaction videos exploded. A new wave of hashtags began to climb the trending charts. Crockett Effect. Read the bill. Mic drop in Congress. Inside newsrooms, producers barked orders. Get Crockett on the 7 p.m. slot. Find Gaetz's team, ask if he'll respond. The confrontation had transcended the House floor. It was now a full-blown media event, the kind that reshapes narratives and careers overnight. Talk show hosts leaned into the drama with relish. On one late-night segment, the host replayed Jasmine's line, "I yield for a question," not a speech 3 times in slow motion, each with a different cinematic soundtrack. Laughter filled the studio, but behind the humor was something far more powerful, a recognition that this wasn't just a viral clapback, it was a turning point. In Florida, the impact cut even deeper. A middle school teacher from Escambia County watched the clip alone in her kitchen. As Jasmine read the numbers, $8.2 million cut, $15,000 students affected, her hands trembled. Tears welled up. She whispered to the screen, "Finally, someone said it." Her reaction was recorded by her teenage son, posted online, and within a day it had racked up millions of views. Comment sections filled with stories, parents, teachers, students, people who had lived the consequences of budget cuts but had never heard their struggles laid bare in Congress with such force. The storm had broken, and it was only the beginning. The media firestorm hadn't even cooled when the political earthquake hit Washington from within. Behind closed doors, party strategists huddled in tense meetings. Gaetz's allies whispered in hallways, their usual swagger replaced by darting eyes and low tones. Then came the moment that made every headline in the Capitol tremble. The House Republican leadership quietly released an internal memo. Matt Gaetz was removed from the Education and Workforce Committee. No fiery speeches, no public defense, just a clean surgical cut. It was a signal not shouted, but carved in stone, a cold political verdict from his own side. The man who once strutted through Capitol corridors like a television star had just been exiled from the stage he used to dominate. Reporters descended on the Hill, swarming Gaetz's office for comment. His staff slammed the door shut. Inside sources said the atmosphere was funeral-like. For a lawmaker who thrived on spectacle, this was the one thing he couldn't perform his way out of. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles away in Florida, another tremor struck. At a small press conference in Pensacola, a retired Navy officer and former school board member stepped up to the microphone. Cameras clicked as he declared his candidacy to challenge Gaetz in the upcoming primary. His opening line sliced through the humid air like a blade. "Enough. We need someone who shows up to work, not someone who treats Congress like cable news." The soundbite spread, instantly amplified by the same storm that had lifted Jasmine's moment into national consciousness. Republican donors who had once backed Gaetz quietly started taking meetings with the challenger. Local papers ran editorials titled "Representation or Performance." The ground was shifting beneath Gaetz's feet, and he could feel it. But perhaps the most telling sign wasn't in headlines, it was in the hallways of Congress itself. Committee attendance spiked. Lawmakers known for missing hearings began showing up early. One staffer was overheard whispering, "No one wants to be the next Gaetz." What began as a 30-second clip had now triggered a political chain reaction, reshaping behavior inside the institution itself. The Crockett Effect was no longer just trending online. It was rewriting the unspoken rules of power. The roar of Washington's media storm still echoed across the nation, but hundreds of miles away, Jasmine Crockett was stepping into a different kind of arena. She wasn't surrounded by reporters or lawmakers now. She was walking through the front doors of a modest Texas elementary school, the kind with faded murals on the walls and playground equipment that had seen better days. The moment she entered the hallway erupted not with cheers but with handwritten letters. Dozens of children, their handwriting uneven and clumsy, held up envelopes they had folded themselves. Some were decorated with stickers, others simply said, "Thank you." Teachers lined the walls, their eyes glistening. The weight of months of underfunding and quiet struggle momentarily lifted. One little black girl, no more than 8 years old, broke through the small crowd and ran straight into Jasmine's arms. She clutched her tightly and whispered into her blazer, "Thank you for fighting for our classroom." Jasmine froze for half a second, feeling the child's heartbeat against her chest. The cameras weren't rolling here. There were no political points to score. This was real. Slow motion captures the scene, the sunlight pouring in through the hallway windows, the child's arms around Jasmine's waist, the quiet hum of emotion rising like a soft hymn. The music swells low and warm. In that moment, all the heated floor debates, the committee statistics, and the viral clips collapse into something profoundly human. Jasmine bends down, meeting the little girl's eyes. "You're the reason I do this," she says softly. The girl beams, not fully understanding the scale of what Jasmine had done, but feeling its impact in the only place that matters, her own classroom. Outside, reporters wait, but inside time seems to slow and the story sheds its political armor to reveal its beating heart. This isn't about headlines anymore. It's about children who now believe someone in Washington actually sees them. According to you, what drives real change more powerfully, a single televised moment that shakes the nation, or thousands of quiet actions that follow in its wake? The image of Jasmine standing in that Texas school lingered like an echo, but back in Washington, the ripple had become a tide. What started as one confrontation on the House floor was now reshaping the very mechanics of Congress. Committee rooms that had once been half empty were suddenly packed. Lawmakers who used to stroll in late now arrived early, binders in hand, eyes sharper than before. Attendance rates on the Education and Workforce Committee spiked to levels not seen in over a decade. Witnesses testifying in hearings found themselves facing questions armed with data page citations and district analyses, not vague talking points. The shift was so noticeable that Capitol Hill staffers started calling it the Crockett Effect. It wasn't a slogan. It was a new standard. Floor speeches began to change too. Instead of fiery monologues crafted for viral TV moments, members started weaving hard numbers into their arguments. Substantive debates, once overshadowed by theatrics, began to dominate airtime. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't always dramatic, but it was real. And people noticed. Then came the moment that cemented this cultural shift. A newly elected representative stood up during a committee session, holding a stack of documents with highlighted sections. She stared down a senior member who had offered a shallow critique of a bill and said, clear as a bell, "With respect, I'd rather be a Crockett than a Gaetz." The room froze for a second, then erupted in knowing laughter. Someone clipped the exchange and posted it to TikTok. Within 24 hours, it had millions of views. Young political creators remixed the clip, pairing it with dramatic music, turning the line into a catchphrase that spread through college campuses, activist circles, and even late-night shows. What had once been a singular act of courage was now a model for a new generation, a standard, a warning, a rallying cry. The Capitol was nearly empty now. Long after the lights in the committee rooms had gone dark and the echo of footsteps had faded, Jasmine Crockett walked alone down the marble hallway, her heels clicking against the floor like distant metronomes in the night. The chandeliers above cast a soft golden light, stretching her shadow long and thin across the walls, as if history itself were walking beside her. This was the same hallway where she had passed Gaetz weeks earlier, the smirk, the whisper, the door closing like an arena gate. But tonight the silence carried a different weight. No cameras, no shouting matches, no viral moments. Just her, the echo of her steps, and the quiet hum of a building that had seen centuries of power struggles. She paused beneath the rotunda, looking up at the painted dome. The flag outside fluttered faintly in the wind, visible through tall windows like a heartbeat against the night sky. Her breath fogged in the cool air as she leaned against the railing, staring down the corridor, as if she could still hear the applause that never happened, the silence that spoke louder than cheers. A voiceover slides in low and deliberate, like the closing lines of a political thriller. Sometimes all it takes is one moment, one voice, one refusal to back down, to redefine the rules of an entire political landscape. Jasmine closes her eyes for a brief second. She's not smiling, but there's a quiet fire burning behind her expression, a mix of exhaustion, clarity, and resolve. She turns, walking deeper into the shadows of the Capitol, her figure disappearing into the warm, dim light. History doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers in empty hallways, long after the world has turned off its cameras. The camera fades in on Jasmine standing on the Capitol steps beneath the night sky. The city hums faintly below headlights, streaking like veins of light through Washington. She looks out, not at reporters, not at colleagues, but at the invisible millions watching beyond the screen. Her voice rises steady and deliberate, cutting through the darkness like a bell. Don't just watch, she says. Question. Don't just like. Act. Democracy doesn't stand when its citizens sit still. The words land like strikes on iron. Her figure, framed against the towering columns and flag fluttering above, becomes almost mythic, a lone silhouette challenging a nation to rise with her. The music swells, cinematic and bold, blending strings with the faint echo of her speech. A quick montage flashes by committee hearings, bustling with new energy, teachers in Florida receiving restored funding, young representatives holding up bills with confidence, a TikTok clip looping, "I'd rather be a Crockett than a Gaetz," as crowds cheer. Then the sound fades. The screen slowly dims until it's completely black. White letters emerge one by one in silence. The Crockett Effect, one moment. One voice. A nation listened. The music cuts. Silence holds for 3 beats, as if inviting the viewer to step into the story themselves. And then the final voiceover comes in, intimate and unwavering. The question isn't whether history can be changed by one moment. It's who will create the next one? Who will you share this story with to demand a politics that is honest, accountable, and real? One courageous voice at the right moment can awaken and transform an entire community. Preparation and unwavering action are the true sources of power. So how will you use your voice to create change? When one voice dares to speak the truth, entire systems can tremble. But when silence takes hold, that's when democracy dies. If this story hit you deep, don't scroll past. Subscribe, like, and share to make sure this message doesn't fade, it spreads. Change starts with those who refuse to stay silent. This story is created to inspire and provoke reflection. It does not represent any individual or organization. Viewer interpretation and discussion are encouraged. The final responsibility rests with each audience member. Now tell me, what do you believe is the greatest force that can rewrite history? Truth, courage, or action? Drop your answer below. I'll be reading every single one.